live stream and let me know when we're good to go. Thank you very much indeed. And with that, and now we're on our best behaviour conference, can we have a warm welcome for our online viewers? Welcome to our Alba National Conference. Now, I'm delighted to announce that we will be joined shortly by the Honorary Consul for Switzerland, Peter Muller-McDougall, as an observer of this morning's proceedings. And when he comes, we'll give him a very warm welcome. Can I take this opportunity, first of all, to pay tribute to our party staff for setting up the hall. That's Christopher McLenny, Corey Wilson, Rob and Callum. And even I, yes, even I, ironed these tablecloths yesterday. Now, my husband, who I hope is in the room, will testify to the fact that I've probably not picked up an iron in our home for the last 20 years. But some women, of course, pick up irons and not necessarily for ironing. You're an active lot on social media, I can tell. Can I also ask you to join me in thanking our wonderful stewards, who I'm going to name because they're worthy of recognition, and they'll be running around and taking your cards and looking after you. They are Gail Hendry, Karen Law, Shannon Donoghue, Kieran Donoghue, Audrey Graham, Stuart McClintock, Kath Ferguson, Alan Harris, Eamon Gallagher, Peter Byrne, Murdo Ritchie and Frankie Mary Graham. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we remind you regarding speaker cards again, because just because your name's on the agenda doesn't necessarily give you a right to speak. I need to know you are here. So please complete your cards when you're proposing and seconding motions or your amendments or whatever it may be. I need to have your cards in. Can I also take this opportunity to thank the hall staff, Paul and Eddie. Now, Eddie is Edward, but he told me on a weekend I can call him Eddie. So it's Eddie for all of us, and Paul, they've been cleaning and polishing and doing their very, very best for us, and they've worked really hard. Thank you very much to Paul and Eddie. Now, we have a number of fringes, one today, as you'll see from the agenda, and I'll announce it just before it, and another couple tomorrow, and of course, this evening's social event, which is a curry, kale, bhangra, I've said it right, because you know I've got the lingo, and a quiz. And please purchase your tickets. It looks like it's going to be a great night. Alex has promised to dance. I don't know if it's the kale or the bhangra, but both will be worth watching. And another highlight of the conference today, no, not the party leader's speech, which we'll hear around 12:15, but that's the women's drinks reception. It's a place to be if you're a woman, and of course we know who you are. That's at 5:30, just where the stalls are. Yes, so don't try your luck, because you'll have no luck trying to get in.
Steve.
Now, conference, yes, just because Steve's wearing a pink cap, doesn't he get you access. Now, last Thursday conference was the 19th of October. We were supposed to have had our promised independence referendum. There will be an independence referendum. No ifs, no buts. Save the dates, we were told. Remember that? And Alex said, and there he was in George Square, speaking to some young folk about what might have been for Scotland. Well, it's not good enough. And then when the Supreme Court in unanimous judgment said no on the 23rd of November last year, we in Alba wasted no time in convening a National Assembly in Perth to discuss where stands Scotland now. In fact, we did it within 2 weeks of that judgment. And after all that time, it took them 11 months, in fact, the SNP have alighted on a new strategy, a smaller mandate. A smaller mandate will somehow deliver a bigger demand, that less seats will mean a bigger mandate. It's not credible, conference. We assemble, therefore, this weekend to take the case for independence forward, as 50% of our people in Scotland want for us to do. And over the past year, we've been busy. Just A little roundup for you. On the 10th of December last year, we held a National Assembly in Perth. Then on the 14th of January, we held a National Assembly in Edinburgh. On the 11th of February, we had a National Council in Ayr. On the 25th of February, we had the Alba Women's Conference in Edinburgh. Then on the 18th of March, there was a Transport National Assembly online. On the 1st of April, a Housing National Assembly online. On the 13th of May, we had a Spring Conference in Inverness. And on the 26th of August, we had a National Council in Rutherglen. And the National Executive Committee of this party met 14 times in 11 months. Because after all, conference, it's deeds, not words. Action, not inactivity. Passion, not apathy. Determination, not hesitation. And leadership, not management, that will deliver freedom for Scotland. So conference and all you viewing online, let's go on with our conference and hear motion number 1. Thank you. Mr. Jack, I'm yet to call you to the stage.
Sorry.
You're handing in a card. As you wish to speak. Let me call motion number 1, which is as I get to it. It's EFTA EEA, maximising the benefits for Scotland, just in advance of the arrival of the Swiss consul, who I know you're looking after, Daniel. Thank you very much indeed. To be proposed by Daniel Jack and seconded by Neil Hanby. Let's hear it, please, for Daniel Jack.
Good morning, conference. Thank you for that warm welcome. I'm going to begin my remarks by asking you a question. Now, it's a tricky one, so I'll throw in a clue. Who was it who bleated constantly, like one of his sheep, and that's your clue, by the way, that Scotland will not be dragged out of the EU against his will? Any ideas? Yes, indeed. It was the unlamented Ian Blackford. Such a loss to front bench politics. Said no one ever. And I don't know about you, but I'm in two minds as to which aspect of this I found most annoying. The fact that he said it so often in such a robotic fashion, or that he thought that we were gullible enough to believe him, knowing full well that he and his colleagues had no intention whatsoever of doing anything to prevent it. Like so many on the SNP benches, his hypocrisy is off the scale. So here we are, having to deal with the consequences of a disastrous policy and a shambolic withdrawal agreement. But let's be honest here. We can hardly be surprised by this, given the caliber of the people involved in getting us here. Johnson, Cummings, and Frost. It sounds like the name of a company of third-rate auctioneers, doesn't it? Which is quite apt when you think about it, given that they sold off the long-term interests of the UK for what mercifully turned out for us to be their short-term political gain. But we are left with their appalling legacy, and we need to deal with it. And given all that has happened since Brexit, what I find most disheartening is the lack of commitment by any party, other than Alba, to give this the serious attention which it deserves. Only Alba, your party, has put in place policies which will mitigate the impact of Brexit in the shortest possible timescale. Our policy of joining EFTA and subsequently becoming party to the European Economic Area Agreement will see an independent Scotland reap the benefits of the free movement of goods, people, services, and capital. And through that, we can begin to rebuild and renew the economic ruin of Brexit. And at this point, I would urge you to watch this week's edition of Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond, because that provides an excellent summary of the benefits of our party's policy. But, and this lies at the heart of this motion, in order to maximise those benefits, an independent Scotland needs to plan and put in place the necessary infrastructure to apply the Schengen Acquis. Now, this is the technical name given to the set of rules and legislation by which these movements can take place seamlessly across the EEA. Without this, our goal of mitigating Brexit will be just that bit harder, and we simply cannot afford that. All of the current EFTA member states, Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein, have applied the acquis. All candidate member states to the EU must commit to applying the acquis. So, if in the future independent Scotland decides to apply for membership of the EU, part of the groundwork for that will have already been fulfilled if this motion will have already been taken place if this motion is fulfilled. Conference, we owe it to the Scottish people to do what we can, as efficiently as we can, to remedy the terrible wrong that has been inflicted on them. And advocating that an independent Scotland should lay the ground for applying the Schengen Acquis will do that. Please support this motion.
Thank you very much indeed, Daniel, setting in a perfect example of timing. Well done to you. And to second the motion, I call Neil Hanvey, MP, who will be followed by Morgan Davis, who will speak in support of the motion. A big welcome to our Westminster Group leader.
Okay, well, Daniel might have beat me to it, but I was going to start off with a shameless plug for this week, Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond, which is on EFTA. And the reason that I'm making a shameless plug is not to curry favour with our party leader, but because it is such an, well, if that happens, I'll be happy with that. But it's because it's a show of real substance. And no one can deny the substance of in the mind and the thoughts of Jim Sillars. And Jim sets out very clearly all of the advantages of EFTA membership over a prolonged wait for EU membership, because it has a tremendous fit with Scotland's position, both in terms of our economic size and our ambitions and our aspirations for independence. The vital aspects that we would retain in terms of sovereignty as a member of EFTA are over key areas of economic activity, from agricultural to fisheries, and most importantly, energy. Now, those industries are going to be absolutely vital to the early days of an independent Scotland as we build our economy and try to correct the damage of Brexit. So in terms of the damage of Brexit, what does that look like? Well, for example, in my constituency, there's a company called, and I have to get my teeth in for this, Todd Fish Tech.
Well done.
And they have been hit by a complete change in EU regulation. Once upon a time, before Brexit, they had a standard regulation that applied across their marketplace, principally in the UK. Now, they are subject to different rules and different ideas of the rules from environmental health officers in every single council area across the UK. And that has had a massive impact on their ability to sell and service their product. And just along the road from them, there's another manufacturer in Dalgety Bay who make environmental trucks, specialist environmental trucks. And they have been hit because they've lost their competitive edge against the European market, and they are struggling to find and support their business model in that way. The other part, and that's central to this motion, is the membership of the Schengen Acquis. And that is important because despite coming through COVID, our health service has been hit massively by the impact of COVID and the loss of all of those workers who were able to come and work freely in the UK. And no other industry is more important in Scotland than our tourism industry, which is also suffering from negative policy proposals from the Scottish government, driving them further out of business, and also struggling to recruit people that we used to have direct access to across the Schengen area. And it's really important that we re-establish those links with Europe to build our economy and open our doors to people who want to come, live, and be part of Scotland's future. Thanks very much. Support the motion.
Thank you, Neelan, for that wonder pronunciation of acqui as aquis. Mr. Hanvey. Acqui. I now call Morgan Davies to speak in favour of the motion, to be followed by Jeff Bush. And just a reminder to everyone, you're absolutely free to film and post all of our public sessions, but private sessions of this party are not to be filmed and not to be posted anywhere. With that, Morgan, welcome.
Welcome. I'm just going to pick up on something you said. This motion is actually also seconded by East Lothian Laku. Just mentioning that. And I'm not going to start with this shameless plug for Alex's program. I was just going to say that I have 3 minutes for this speech, whilst Alex Salmond has just made Scotland Speaks, Series 1, Episode 16, Independence and After, a 1 hour and 6 minute program. But I will summarize in 3 minutes.
Can I just stop you there, Morgan, just for a moment? Can I ask conference to join me in welcoming the Honorary Consul General for Switzerland, Peter Muller-MacDonald. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Davies, have you now adopted a disguise because there's an Honorary Consul General here?
No, it's my eyesight. I can't see with these spotlights.
Morgan.
I can't read the speech. If I
No
don't have it
pressure,
on.
Morgan.
I'm honoured to be speaking on behalf of my Laku, Alba, East Lothian, in support of this resolution. We had submitted another resolution on trade relationships in an independent Scotland. We felt that it might be better to leave the decisions on what trade relations an independent Scotland has to when we are independent. We don't know, unfortunately, when that will be, and the world changes rapidly at the moment. We don't know what would be best for an independent Scotland. However, the Unionists demand, they insist that we give them every detail of what an independent Scotland would like, so they can obsess over it, nitpick at it, and criticise everything. If we don't give them details and then claim that we've not told them anything and they don't know what an independent Scotland will be like. So we have to have a balance between detailing what an independent Scotland may be like and saying that ultimately what an independent Scotland will be like will be up to the people of Scotland. So it was agreed that we would drop our resolution and support this resolution. There were very good arguments made for supporting this, the main one being that growing numbers of people from the UK have noticed when they go and travel to Europe that the UK citizens are now treated as outsiders to the EU and have to queue up at passport controls. And they see the EU citizens, with people with EU passports, going straight through and having no problem. So that is a major thing. That's something that relates to people. You can talk about trade, you can talk about all sorts of things, but what resonates with people is when it impacts them, and this certainly impacts them. And going to Europe will get more difficult when it comes to 2025, because from 2025, there will be a new system in place to travel to Europe. You will have to apply for an ETIAS travel authorization in advance of traveling to Europe. That stands for the European Travel Information and Authorization System. It's another level of, if you like, bureaucracy designed to make the Schengen area of Europe more secure. It's essentially a visa waiver system, as America has, for those countries that the EU doesn't require visas from, which is the UK. Now, joining EFTA will be an easier and more straightforward than rejoining the EU membership. And I know that we, within our party, we may differ on whether we should join the EU or not. In 2014, it was very simple. We were a member of the EU, albeit through the UK. It therefore made sense to retain that membership. But we are no longer in the EU. Now, we may, as Scotland, may not have voted for it, but the reality is we're no longer in the EU. And we have been out. The vote was, what, 6 years ago? 7 years ago? Time flies, doesn't it? How many Tory Prime Ministers has that been? So that's a decision that will need to be made. But joining EFTA would restore trade relations, would restore the free movement of people into and out of Scotland. Now, there will present some difficulties because if we are in the Schengen area and we have free movement with 30 European countries, that will raise the debate of a border between us and England. But that needn't be difficult. The Unionists present that as a difficulty, but in essence, we're choosing to join 30 other European countries, while England will choose to be, in essence, an isolationist state. It's their problem, not ours. And I think that's how we should view it, and maybe how we should pitch it. So I'll just come to a conclusion and say that I would urge you to support this resolution. We wanted something different, but after discussion, we realized that this was the better option, and it's a more straightforward option, and it's a more easily understood option, and it will restore what has been lost, what has been taken to us by those that promoted Brexit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I now call Jeff Bush, who will be our final speaker, unless this is a card from, not this one. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Jeff Bush, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, conference. I've just collected some varnish from the stairway there. Thanks for the warning. I'm speaking in favour of the motion, and I've got three main points to make. The first is that I really dislike the conflation promoted by the SNP and others of independence and EU membership. The problem with it, there are a number of problems with that, because as we know, EU membership will not just happen. But there's a problem that I think not too many people have realised, and that is that Scotland, independent Scotland in the EU, is a false promise. It can't actually be delivered and will be exposed by unionists when it can do most damage to independence. And that is why it's really important that Alba pushes the EFTA route, because it is deliverable, and it's more appropriate to Scotland's needs. The second point I want to make is that EFTA is not a jobs for the boys route into Europe. It's fair to say that the EU is regarded as a bit of a troughers' paradise, and is it any wonder that many of the people promoting membership of the EU have formed in the troughing stakes. And my final point is to say I've actually set up a Facebook group called Yes for EFTA, and I'd invite everybody to please go to that and join it. It'd be great if you could do that. And a wee bit more promotion. There are Yes for EFTA flyers available. They'll be available from tomorrow for anybody to take away with them. So please support the motion. I feel very strongly about it.
Thank you very much indeed, Jeff. And there are no further cards in to speak and no cards against. So can I ask the motion number 1 on the agenda, EFTA EEA, maximising the benefits for Scotland, is passed by acclaim. We now move to motion number 2 on the agenda, energy strategy. Now, this was to be proposed by Charlie Abel, who is can't make it yet, is on his way, as I understand it. And I have Alba Aberdeenshire and Alba Aberdeen on the list to speak. I don't have a card in for either of the lacquers yet. Can I encourage you to submit a card, but Ken McCaskill MP's name is also on the motion, so I'm going to ask Kenny if you will kindly propose. And Kenny, when I do, there is a minor amendment, if I may ask you on behalf of the proposer of the amendment, which, if you accept it, can then be included in the motion as amended. The motion reads that conference further demands that there should be a 20% public share in all offshore wind energy projects. The amendment from Craig Dempsey, seconded by Michelle Kerr, asks that we insert the word minimum before 20%. So, yeah, I think, Kenny, if you're happy to accept it, you have the floor of the conference with you. So can I invite Kenny to propose the motion as amended? Kenny McCaskill MP.
Well, thank you very much, Taz. I was simply here to support Aberdeenshire because it's been at the epicentre of our renewable revolution. Equally, it has to be said that East Lothian is now at the epicentre of the new renewable energy resolution. It's therefore appropriate that I should be seconding or now having to step up to move it. Oil and gas has been there. It has been exploited, but Scotland lost out. We have the absurdity that the Rosebank field that is now going to be developed at a pace and a scale that threatens not just Scotland, but all of us. Developed it should be, but at a scale that benefits our country and our workforce, that is owned by Equinor, the Norwegian state energy company. The people who will benefit most from this aren't the people of Scotland, it's the people of Norway. They'll gain the money that we should have got, that Norway already has from its state oil fund that we've missed out on. We can't afford to allow that to happen with renewable energy. We were told in the 1980s that the oil and gas was depleting and would soon be gone. We were told that again in the 1990s, and in 2014 we were told it was all but gone. Now it's the crux of the revitalisation, if not the stabilisation of the UK economy. And as I say, at a pace and a scale that's unacceptable when there are other ways that we must ensure that we get that just transition. We do have to move from oil and gas, but we cannot have the absurdity that we close down the North Sea, that we lay off our workforce there, and our nation doesn't get the benefit. What we have to do is to have that just transition. We might very well hear some comments from that tomorrow from Gordon Martin from the RMT, who will be commenting on it. Probably more unreal for him as he focuses on that, but we work closely, Neil and I, and the party leadership of the RMT, who represent the workforce in the offshore sector, both oil and gas and renewables. There has to be a just transition. But let's emphasise the benefits that can come from renewable energy, because we should and will still benefit from oil and gas. But renewable energy is infinite. The scale is massive, not simply onshore, but now offshore. You'll recall at a previous National Council, I had to go away and explain to you, after I'd learnt myself, just what a terawatt was. A terawatt is 1 billion kilowatt hours. And Scotland is to produce 124 terawatts. That's 124 billion kilowatt hours of energy that will be pipelined south. Some of it's going directly because they're cabling it from my constituency and indeed from Aberdeenshire directly to points in England, missing out even coming ashore in Scotland. Other aspects are going straight from the offshore wind sector down. But we have more energy from one wind farm between Neil and I's constituency and Berwick Bank, more energy than we have households in Scotland to supply. So the need is significant, and it makes the case for an independent Scotland. Because how can it be that a country that is so energy rich can have almost half of its people in fuel poverty? And we'll be hearing from the Energy Action Scotland tomorrow at a fringe meeting. People who cannot power their homes, people who cannot heat their homes, people who cannot wash their clothes for their bairns or even charge up their phone to look for employment or anything else. We have to make that point. The SNP have abandoned their oil campaign in many ways, and they certainly abandoned it too soon, I think, in retrospect. But we've got to make clear the point. Scotland is energy rich. We do have to move from oil and gas to renewables, but we have to go at a pace and a scale that allows us to continue to benefit and to make sure we protect those who work in it. But the renewable revolution offers huge opportunities for Scotland. It should be creating businesses, it should be providing jobs, it should be heating and powering our homes. That is our energy. We missed out on oil and gas. We ain't missing out on renewable energy. We've got to stake that claim. This is our energy. We're energy rich, and it's time our people benefited from it.
You're here. I'm now going to call Josh Robertson to second the motion, to be followed by Gavin Bain and Jacqueline McDowell. And can I also invite the proposer and seconder, proposer Craig Dempsey and Michelle Kerr, who seconded the amendment, if they may wish to speak to the motion as amended. We'd love to hear from you both too. Please welcome Josh Robertson.
Conference, as many of you are aware, we currently have a by-election in the Motherwell South East and Ravenscraig ward. Keep up to date with our election events on the website. We'll be out this Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Saturday. And hopefully the chair will grant me a 30-second extension for that short plug.
Granted. You can have a minute for a by-election to promote it.
As I've travelled across the ward on these bitterly cold nights, I've noticed a distinct juxtaposition between the haves and the have-not. At the tap end of Muirhouse sit mansions with pristine gardens, £60,000 electric cars in the driveway, every light on in the house, and the occupants comfortably walking about in shorts and t-shirts. In comparison, at the bottom end of Muirhouse, the situation couldn't be any different. No off-street parking for tax-efficient electric cars, no spare money to run Blackpool illuminations, and families struggling to heat their homes. Conference, what a disgrace. What a disgrace in a country with such a wealth of natural resources that we've been blessed with, that still 47 years since the first barrel of oil was extracted from the North Sea, we still have people in this country that suffer such extreme fuel poverty. Food in their bellies are a quick heat, not a choice anyone in this country should have to make. As the UK government announced a £30 billion bonanza in the Rosebank oil field, the Scottish Government is gleefully announcing council tax freezes. How inadequate, Conference. Council tax freezes don't put money in the meter. Council tax freezes doesn't fund an adequate NHS. Council tax freezes don't enhance public services. And council tax freezes don't invest into decaying infrastructure. Do you know what would fund these services? The £375 billion that Westminster has received from taxing our oil. Conference, we know that independence is the only way to fully regain the potential of our oil and invest in our future. But with the climate emergency and the transition to green energy, we've been presented with another opportunity, renewables, namely offshore wind and tidal generators. As a devolved matter, the Scottish Parliament can and has used this resource. Did we fare any better, Conference? Has Scotland's new energy wealth been exploited to the benefit of our people? North Lanarkshire's council's attempt to close over 40 leisure and community centres suggests not. Why not, Conference? As with most things the SNP Green Coalition has touched, the opportunity has been wasted. Rather than setting Scotland up for success, Scotland was put up for sale. Rather than creating a national energy company, Sturgeon sold up the rights to the highest bidder. Conference, we got a one-off payment of £750 million. What did the private companies get? Commonweal estimates that Scotland will provide up to £5.5 billion of pre-tax profit a year. £5.5 billion a year, Conference. We can't keep making the same mistakes from the past. The kids of the future can't be sitting in crumbling schools, going home to a cold house and empty cupboards. We, the Scottish people, finally have to receive the benefit from the natural resources of our land. Conference, support the motion, and let's not let history repeat itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Josh. I now call Jacqueline McDowell to be followed by Gavin Bain. Thank you, Alan. Jacqueline McDowell. Welcome, Jacqueline.
Thank you. Just when I saw this, I just thought I have to come up here and speak about it. So I would ask you to support the motion for a couple of reasons. I was in Norway this year on holiday, and all I heard everywhere we went, from towns like East Kilbride, Airdrie, like just Lanarkshire, was, oh, we can do this because of our oil fund. We can do this because of our oil fund. We can do this because of our oil fund. I actually wanted to choke them and say, we could have had an oil fund as well, you know, but we don't because we're the go cap and to Westminster government. So although Scotland's an energy-rich country, we obviously have no such fund. And I work for a homeless charity. And this year again, I will have to answer the question, what will I do, Jacqueline? Will I eat or will I heat? Now, what do I say to that? How can I answer that question when people are on the brink of homelessness, so they have no money, they can't, now you get the sites that tell you how you can reduce costs and, you know, don't buy a Costa and don't buy this and put your energy down by a degree. If the guys were putting their energy down by a degree, they'd be sitting in like -10 by now. And they don't have any disposable income to go out and buy things like Costa coffees, so they have no money. So I have to help them try and get to food banks. Food banks in a country like Scotland, where it's now seemed acceptable to have a food bank, but you can't even just go to a food bank. You now have to get referred to a food bank, and you can't go too many times a week to a food bank. It's just actually, it breaks my heart to see what's happening in Scotland when we're such an energy-rich place. So, Conference, I ask you to support this motion because I don't want to be any more years asking people that come to me to choose whether to eat or heat their homes. Thank you.
I now call Gavin Bain to be followed by Craig Dempsey to speak in favour of the motion. Welcome, Gavin.
Welcome, Conference. I could have kept my seat. I put the card in a few minutes ago because I realised with some alarm that this motion was seconded by Aberdeen and Charlie wasn't going to be here. So fearing you might be short of a seconder, I put my card into the stage. But following those excellent speeches, most of it has already been said. We did discuss this proposal in the LACU, and we do support it. There were some energetic debate generated around the carbon capture part of it, which is our existing policy. I think is a discussion going forward. We enthusiastically support the part of this where that recognises that the people of Scotland need to be able to benefit from the resources of our country. And we see this as a really important proposal. It has our support, and please support the motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Gavin, and I'll ask that the record reflects that you've seconded the motion on behalf of your LACU. That's the appropriate thing to do. Thank you very much indeed. Gavin, our next speaker is Craig Dempsey. Welcome, Craig.
Morning, Conference. When I read this motion, I thought, yeah, brilliant, excellent, until I got to the bit that said 20%. Why are we limiting ourselves to 20%? 25, 30, 40, doesn't matter. We shouldn't limit ourselves the way the Scottish Government did with the offshore licences. We are an energy-rich country. We could be one of the richest countries in the world, but we need to benefit from it. As Kenny pointed out, or I can't remember who was pointed out, 5.5 billion a year in profit. We deserve 20% minimum, but let's ask for 30 and see what we get. So I'm asking you to support this motion today with the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Craig. And there are no cards in against. So can I ask that motion number 2 on energy strategy be passed by acclaim? Thank you, Conference. I'm now going to move to motion number 3 on the agenda, entitled Criminal Justice and Human Rights, to be proposed by Neil Hanvey MP and seconded by Marjorie Thompson. Can I invite Neil Hanvey?
Hi, Conference. Yesterday, I attended the LGB Alliance conference in London. The theme of the conference this year was a question of courage. And the programme for the conference included essays on that theme from philosopher Kathleen Stock, journalists Julie Bindel and Julie Burchell, and writer Simon Edge, and me. I was the only UK politician to be invited to contribute to that programme. Now that's nice for me, but it is important recognition for the work of our party. And a little over a month ago, I wrote a column in The National about the Scottish Government's Hate Crime and Public Order Bill. That article has been viewed over 200,000 times on my Twitter post alone. We are raising awareness of this issue in Scotland, in the UK, and across the world. And as a party, Alba are cutting through politically, and not just on independence. Not everyone is particularly happy about that, of course. So Tim Hopkins, the director of the Equality Network, criticised my article in The National in a letter. And he said the new offence only applies to abusive or threatening behaviour that is done with the intention of stirring up hatred. The Act will have no effect on freedom of speech. But the bar for prosecution is extremely low. No corroboration is required, and the definition of harassment is ill-described and includes this wholly subjective test of causing the person alarm and distress. Now, that might not sit in the section of the bill that addresses some of the principal concerns that we hold, but it is in that bill. And any lawyer worth their salt will refer to that as the gold standard test of harassment from here on in. So it doesn't matter where they have put that provision. The reality is that that test will exist, and that is the reality, how weak the test for prosecution is. Hopkins also claims that that is untrue. But I have discussed this with barristers, solicitors, advocates. All of them suggest otherwise, as I have made the case just now. Of course, it's true. And let's not forget, Hopkins is part of a movement whose main thrust has been to shut down debate, to limit freedom of speech. So I'm not sure I believe a word he says or any of his reassurances. His claims that I have misunderstood the provisions of the Act and how they will be used by cry-bully activists is simply not credible. They seek to redefine the principle of harm to include words, and the words that will be equivalent to a violent physical assault. I want to expand on a few points that I touched on in that article. First of all, on the eve of the LGB Alliance conference, I sent out a tweet, which some of you may have seen. And that was, if you told me 10 years ago that the UK Labour Party and the SNP would be the most homophobic parties that would have existed in my lifetime, I would have laughed in your face. Yet here we are. Both of them are out homophobing Thatcher's Section 28. And it's not just the Hate Crime and Public Order Bill that is a threat. Conversion therapy ban, or the so-called conversion therapy ban, in reality is a modern conversion therapy proposal. Vulnerable young people, whether they are straight or gay, will be subject to physical and psychological development arrestment by experimental chemicals. Their bodies are to be mutilated by surgeries that are irreversible. And I want to tell you this little story that was relayed to us yesterday at LGB conference. There was an experiment. Now, I'm not a fan of animal experimentation, so I'm not endorsing this at all, but it's really important. There was an experiment done on puberty blockers in young lambs, male lambs. And the lambs that were given puberty blockers, ordinarily lambs can find their way to food, they respond through a maze, they learn the way, and they're able to repeat that. The lambs that were given puberty blockers that didn't have that vital neurological development of adolescence that go through puberty, They were unable to re-find their way to the food source. They were lost, absolutely lost. And that is the reality of these drugs will have. And what I would say is Sex Matters, a very important charity who are standing up for sex-based rights, have issued a very honest appraisal of what this conversion therapy legislation would actually mean. But the most important thing is appraise yourself of the information that they're providing. And most importantly, write to your MP and MSP. Leave them in absolutely no doubt how you feel about this march against equality that the SNP and the UK Labour Party are determined to pursue. The other points that I raised in this article were regarding the European Convention of Human Rights. Now, it's not hyperbole to say that the Hate Crime and Public Order Bill conflicts with them. And I'll just run through a few of those articles very quickly to explain why. So, Article 1, well, that's an obligation to respect human rights. So I'll return to that after I've dealt with the other ones. Article 3, prohibition on torture. If you are a woman in prison and you object to a male prisoner, Isla Bryson or Adam Graham, as he should be known, that would be outlawed by this legislation. You would not be allowed to make that kind of complaint. It would be transphobic. And so how can you, we've already had very compelling evidence from the rapporteur on torture to the Scottish Parliament, which they ignored, about this very issue. So it's a really important conflict with those article rights. The right to a fair trial. And there is no right, if there's no right to speak the truth at trial, to speak the truth, the material reality that surrounds us, then how can you have a fair trial? There should be no punishment without law. Well, prosecution, the arrest and the harassment of people who speak out for material reality, that is the punishment. There's no trial for that. That is the exact activity of the trans cry-bully activists. The right to respect for your private life and family life. This legislation reaches into your home, to your dinner table, and prevents you from having frank exchanges with your family, whether you're concerned about them or the process of such legislation. That could be considered incitement of hatred. The freedom of thought and the freedom of expression, Articles 9 and 10. We are restricted. People who advocate for women's rights, people who say that same-sex attraction is male to male or female to female, that could be considered a hate crime. We've already seen in Australia, lesbians are now banned by their human rights organizations from having female-only spaces. This is an absolute obscenity. It is unbelievable that this is happening in the world today. Thanks for that. I've been waiting for a wee minute to get a drink for a while. Yeah, so, and freedom to assembly. Well, we know, we've seen the mobs outside women's events where all they want to do is watch a film and talk to each other. And the hostility that happens to deny women the right to assemble and associate is absolutely unbelievable. And that Police Scotland are willing to go along with this is just shameful. And then, as I'm wrapping up the end of these articles, but they are important that this detail is put on this, this legislation. Article 14, prohibition of discrimination. Well, if you can't say what sex is, then how can you possibly ensure that there is no discrimination? If you can't define what the word sex means, if you can't say adult human female, adult human male, and you can't use that word in law, then you have no ability to prevent discrimination. And the I'll touch on is Article 17, but this loops right back to Article 1, the first one that I mentioned, and that is the prohibition of the abuse of rights. Now, Article 17 is quite a complex rule, but effectively, what it says is you can't use the law to infringe rights, and that is exactly what the Scottish Government have done with their hate crime and public order bill. It is an insult to human rights legislation across the world, and it must be resisted, it must be repealed, and I beg you, please back this resolution and support my calls for repeal.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alan. I now call Marjorie Thompson to second the motion. Marjorie, welcome.
Thank you, Tasmina. Because I probably know more about other topics like nuclear weapons, I called the partner of the chair of Scottish CND, Sarah Price, and said, what do you think are the salient points that I can make in 3 minutes? So I want to thank Sarah. I then found out that her dog, Douglas, who knows he's a boy dog, is a huge fan of Neil's. And Neil, this is a picture of Douglas wearing a rosette from your last election. This legislation is poorly thought out and shoddy and ambiguous. I'd like to make two basic points. One about freedom of speech, and the second one about the protection of rights of women and children. Freedom of speech was considered so important that the founding fathers of a nation that has now lost its way in the United States Constitution included it in the First Amendment, which was, of course, influenced by many Scottish people. This bill goes much further than restricting free speech, however. It raises the specter of people being prosecuted for what they say, but also for what they think, what's their motive, and also for what other people think when they hear the words. The police will be forced to reach a decision on whether the speaker intended to stir up hate. However, that is defined, but the bill also doesn't make that clear. How can a person's thoughts be known without seeing inside their head? The bill goes further than considering whether the speaker intentionally expressed hate. It additionally places emphasis on whether the recipient of the so-called hateful words has been offended. How can the speaker be responsible for how their words are received? The listener could be mistaken, or having an off day, or have mental health issues, or perhaps they are grieving because of a relationship breakdown or bereavement. And reasons why these words were received in a way other than the way in which they were intended, and all are out with the power of the speaker to control. And yet, if the recipient is offended, that could be enough for it to be deemed hate speech. We all know J.K. Rowling. Her views on independence need to evolve, but she is very good on this issue. She's the world's most famous children's author, and in an independent Scotland would be a huge contributor to our exchequer. She wrote a thoughtful and sensitive essay of sex and gender in 2020, setting out her reasons for feeling that trans rights are in conflict with the rights of women and children in certain circumstances. It was a well-reasoned piece, and it was not remotely transphobic, but she would be found on the wrong side of this badly drafted hate crime law because of the way in which it is received. That's why on the 17th of October, she tweeted, "I'll happily do 2 years if the alternative is compelled speech and forced denial of the reality and importance of sex. Bring on the court case. It'll be a lot more fun than I've ever had on a red carpet." This leads to the second and final point, the safety of women and children. Let's compare categories who are listed as receiving protection within the Equality Act 2010 and the Hate Crime and Public Order Act. For the former, protected characteristics are age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage or civil partnership in employment only, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex, and sexual orientation. For the hate crime bill, it is age, which was added later, disability, race and related characteristics, religion, sexual orientation, and transgender identity. The categories specifically protecting women and sex, pregnancy and maternity are conspicuously absent. This is critical for the safety of women and their protection and the maintenance of essential women-only spaces. We all know about the prisons, the rape crisis centers, and the sporting events. The Scottish Government has already shown in last December's rushed GRR legislation with the furore around Bryson and the Cornton Vale prison, that it doesn't know what a woman is. Equally dodgy legislation, like the GRR, besides getting rid of Scotland's most famous learner driver, pits the Scottish government against Westminster in a battle the people of Scotland don't support and which it can't win. It makes clear that the definition of a woman, adult human female, is a vitally important concept in speech. This motion makes clear that the definition of a woman, adult human female, is a vitally important concept in speech, life, and law. It's not just a gotcha question for TV interviews. That which you cannot define, you cannot defend. It is not hate speech to call women women or men men, or for anyone to deny the evidence of their own eyes or to be compelled to state something that evidently is not true. Truth matters. While it is right the UK Equality Act introduces important protections for certain categories, even this act is flawed through not taking into account the problems that occur when one of the protected characteristics clashes with the rights and privileges of the others. If trans women, also known as men, are allowed into women-only spaces simply on the grounds that they feel they are women, then those spaces cease to be women-only. The hate crime bill goes one further, even than the Equality Act, by not acknowledging the discrimination that commonly occurs on the basis of sex. Through the omission of this important category and through inadequate definition of terms, the hate crime bill not only makes it more likely for predators to gain access to spaces where women and children are vulnerable, it also makes provision for those same women to be tried for hate speech if they object. Here, it is necessary to add, as always, the acknowledgement that not all men are predators. It is only a tiny proportion of them. The same for trans women. Most men who feel they have to live out their inner self as a woman, whatever that means, are emphatically not predators, rapists, and voyeurs. I will go further to insist they must be able to live their lives in peace, fulfillment, and without discrimination. Coming to the end. However, they remain men, and as was demonstrated recently in the shocking case of the butcher from the borders who kidnapped the girl, it is impossible to tell which are the dangerous ones just by looking. The safety of women and children must be protected, and the Hate Crime and Public Order Bill Scotland is poorly drafted, inadequately defined, and presents a serious challenge to women and children through the erosion of sex-based rights and essential women-only spaces. I second this motion. I'd also like to thank the Swiss consul for his country's stand last night at the UN, voting in favor of a ceasefire. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Marjorie. I have 3 more cards in. So Lynn Sheridan, to be followed by Dave Llewellyn, who's promised me to be in his best behaviour, to be followed by Al Duff. Lynn Sheridan, the wonderful Lynn Sheridan. Please welcome Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. Conference. I want to, first of all, thank Neil for this motion, because it's vitally important that we as a party take a very strong stand on this proposed legislation. Because as has been outlined by the previous speakers, 52% of the population of Scotland has been ignored. 52%. Not the 0.1% of those who identify as being trans. They're included in the legislation. But 52% of us who identify as adult female, human females, are ignored, which is an absolute disgrace. Conference, I don't know who the civil servants are at Holyrood who are writing this legislation, or the ministers. Well, I was going to say numpties, but you use the words that you feel appropriate. Conference, it's really, you know, we're moving back to a position of places like communist Russia and East Germany and wherever, where the word suggestiveness comes into play. If I am triggered by what you've said, then I can phone the police and report you and get you done under this legislation. Now, most of us have been to parties across the length and breadth of Scotland, and it's the weird and wonderful things that get discussed in parties. And all of a sudden, whatever you've said at that party in a private environment, you can also be reported to the police and end up possibly being charged and possibly being sent to prison. Certainly losing your job, losing your income, losing your status in our society. This cannot stand. We have to campaign within our party and external to our party. Neil's been leading the way in regards to this, to fight this capricious crap of legislation that has been put forward. Conference, I'll finish with a quote from one of our judges in Scotland. I don't often quote judges, but I think it's appropriate in relation to this piece of legislation that we take on board what Lord Sedley says. He says that free speech includes not only the inoffensive, but the irritating, the contentious, the eccentric, the irritating, the heretical, and the unwelcome and provocative. And if we can't have free speech, then what is the point of having any type of speech in our society? I ask you to support the motion. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you, Lynn. I now call Dave Llewellyn to be followed by our final speaker, Al Duff. Dave.
Hi. 2 years ago, I stood up at our inaugural conference and spoke for a man who was in prison at the time. That man's now in Switzerland after having to go to Ireland last week. Because when he came back from Iceland, he was arrested, he was detained at Glasgow Airport under the Terrorism Act. The Terrorism Act was brought in on all the nonsense that happened a couple of years ago. They brought it in, now they're using it to basically take out anybody at all as a dissident. This hate crimes bill is going to do exactly the same. The actual meaning of the word transphobe, which is going to be a criminal offence. Trans means across or change. And phobe comes from the Greek phobos, which is fear. So basically a transphobe is someone who's afraid of change. That generally tends to be somebody who doesn't want to get their bits lopped off, rather than the people who are actually complaining about it. So as far as that's concerned, language is important. The words that we use are important, and we can't afford to let other people basically make up words and use them, because as well as the transphobe thing, and a few other words I actually put up. What they actually mean transphobe would be transsexodic, which is basically hatred of homosexuals, so hatred of transsexuals, which is what they say it means. But so we've got to challenge them every time they use a word. Get it on t-shirts. Get it on t-shirts. Who's the transphobe? Fear of change. Use. But most of all, I want to point out this. Craig has been victimised for standing up for freedom of speech, for standing up for justice for Julian Assange, and he deserves our support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I now call our final speaker, Al Duff. Al, fresh from campaigning in the shopping centres in the by-election of Motherwell South East and Ravenscraig. He was an first time he's done it, total star. Big round of applause for Al. He was brilliant. Welcome.
Good afternoon, delegates. First of all, I'd like to say that Neil, I think you're very, very brave. And I think he deserves a round of applause. Because you're going against majority opinion among the chattering classes, but not among the people. And that's what counts. Now, I'm a liberal socialist as well as nationalist, and I support trans rights, support gay rights, but there's an issue here. You touched on it. This bill, this act, is dissolving the distinction between the public and the private. Now, I know the boundaries are shifting in the modern age, in the information age, between the private and the public. We all know that. But certain things have to be retained. And there is an ancient defense of dwellings. In other words, you should be allowed to speak in your own home freely. And that ancient defense is being bulldozed away. And someone mentioned totalitarianism. That is the road to totalitarianism. We must be free to speak as we please at home. This is an essential and ancient defense in law, and the SNP has no right to trash it. So I support the motion.
There are no cards in against, so can I ask that motion number 3 on criminal justice and human rights is passed by acclaim? Now, before we move to our conference highlights, aside from the Prosecco reception, can I, for women only, can I remind delegates that there's a fringe at lunchtime between 1:30 and 2:30 p.m. in the hall upstairs in the Lesser Hall, entitled Scotland and New Labour, with speakers Les Huckfield, former Labour MP and MEP, and Craig Berry, chaired by Marjorie Thompson. Well worth a visit after you've managed to grab your lunch. Can I also ask you to take time to visit the stall holders? We've got obviously the Alba merchandise stall, there's food and drink there. We've got the Alba quality stall, the Alba Housing and Transport and Working Group, Alba Youth, iScot Magazine, MPH Boilers, Tim Rowdett and the Currency Group, and SSRG, and Paul Blythe Water Ionizer. With that, we now turn to our conference highlight as Robert skates his way to the back of the hall. Those men have polished everywhere. We have, though, in advance of hearing from the party leader, just a short video of some of what he's been doing over the past year. Over to you in the AV section. We're going to start again with the volume. Thank you. We're going to start again with the volume. Still no volume. I wonder if the folks at home can hear and we can't. Maybe someone will text us. Can somebody tell me what's happening? The suspense. He loves the suspense, of course. Did Alex tell you to mute it? It wouldn't surprise me, just to catch me off guard. I would just appreciate some communication from the back of the room to the chair as to what's happening. Is it able to be fixed? Is it able to be fixed? 2 seconds, okay? We'll wait, but you're spoiling all the pictures. Can you not rewind it and start again? I don't know what they just played there that got a clap, but me! Oh. I'm not sure what that hand signal means. It's not going to work, right? Okay. Well, I'm sorry about that. We will get it working at some point today because I'd very much like you to hear it. But then I will also now, of course, pass over to the man who's going to introduce the man, our Deputy Leader, Kenny McCaskill.
Can I start with our apologies for that? I'm a poor substitute for what you would have seen from Alec in his performance. But this is the highlight of conference. The reason it's actually rather earlier than normal is actually we have quite a few highlights coming up. I won't spoil the surprise, but we're having this one early because there's more to come, believe you me. It is important, I think, relevant that we're meeting here in Maryhill. I remember writing a book, 1919. West of Scotland soldiers were confined to the barracks in Scotland because the British authorities couldn't rest upon doing and following orders if the push came to shove. 100 years on, now we're seeing that they're not allowing the people of Scotland a ballot because they don't trust just what the outcome of that might be. But that's why over 40 years ago, I started on a political journey. I was persuaded to join a political party seeking Scottish independence. I was persuaded to join by somebody that I'd been at school with, somebody who would chat my door, not to have to say seeking my vote. It was actually the Veterans Pools, but it shows we went back a long way. He had a glint in his eye. It's steel and determination. He said that the circumstances in Scotland could change, that Scotland could be independent, that the hegemony that then existed of a Labour Party and one particular party that was almost a one-party state could be overturned and overcome. At that stage, the party I joined had 2 MPs. That was all. A handful of councillors. Membership wasn't great. The Scottish Parliament was but a dream. But he said it could be done, and so I embarked on that journey with him. And he struggled and he campaigned, and many of us have stood at his side all the way through then. He took us closer than we've ever been. The tragedy is we're having to start again, but we're going on a new journey in a new party from circumstances that are somewhat similar to what we faced in 1980s. But we can have that same success because that man has the same steely determination, the same glint in his eye, the same strategy and use and determination that has got us to where we were in 2014 and that will get us where we need to be in the coming years. So I give you the real highlight in real life, not on the celluloid screen, Alex Salmond.
Well, a conference. We're here in the great city of Glasgow once again, and I want to start this speech with a word of praise for the Glasgow local area campaign unit, our LACU in Alba. Now, I'm aware, of course, that there is a story about the former Labour Prime Minister and a wonderful leader of the opposition, Harold Wilson, way back, that he was making a speech in Plymouth, Devonport. And in that speech, during one of his great election campaigns, he started it by saying, "The Royal Navy is the premier service." Why do I say the Royal Navy is the premier service? And somebody shouted out, "Because you're in Devonport." Now, I want to start by saying Glasgow LACU is one of the finest LACUs in Alba.
Hey.
But there is a big reason for that. I was privileged 2 or 3 weeks ago to make with Tasmeen Ahmed's sake a film about the Wynford estate. And it's well worth a look at, because what's going on there is a total scandal. I think there's going to be a topical resolution today, and there's a fringe meeting, I think, tomorrow, held by Nick Dury and the Glasgow Laku. But basically what's happening is the Wheatley Group, which is actually the former Glasgow Housing Association, it's named after John Wheatley, who must be burrowing in his grave at what's being done in his name. Because Wheatley Group are going to spend £70 million plus, fantastic, and they're going to turn 600 houses for social rent into 250 houses for social rent, and they're going to sell some others. And I think from a financial point of view, it looks a good equation for the Wheatley Group, who act now like a corporate business, not a housing association. But it's a bad deal for the people of Wynford, the people of Glasgow, and the people of Scotland. We have a housing crisis in Scotland. Why do we want to have a project which takes 600 houses for social rent and turns them through demolition into 250 with 50 for sale in the private sector? But you know what inspired me about the meeting I had in Wynford, one of the We Are Up meetings this summer, and the programs I made, that heart of community activists in the Wynford estate, a real community, campaigning to save these high-rises, the social houses within them, campaigning for renovation instead of demolition. At the very heart was a determined group of activists who've decided to join the Alba party. Yeah. So I'm going to make a shameless plug, not for the television programme that Taz and I do, but for the social event tonight from Glasgow Laku. Make sure that every single one of you buys a ticket for that event and supports our Laku here in the city of Glasgow, because they're doing great campaigning work which will pay political dividends. Yeah. Now, I'm going to have less political knockabout than I normally do in speeches, because I've got some important things to say to the party. But I can't resist congratulating Rishi Sunak on being the longest serving Tory Prime Minister for quite a while. 1 year in office, it seems, nonetheless, that qualifies you in the Tory party for a long service medal. And then, of course, he's opposed by Sir Keir Starmer. You know, I've always wondered about this. You know, we've actually got a situation where the Labour opposition has the knighthood, and the Prime Minister's going to wait to get his peerage. But it does seem an imbalance of authority. Sir Keir Starmer gets up to oppose and question the Prime Minister. Well, actually question, not so much oppose. You see, I've known a range of Labour opposition leaders in my time, right back to Harold Wilson, who I thought was a substantial political figure. But Sir Keir Starmer is notable. Most Labour leaders wait till they get into office before they betray their principles. Sir Keir Starmer has done it in opposition. Now, my view, delegates, if Alba hadn't been formed 2 years ago, then it would be necessary to reform it today. 2 years ago, some of us believed the SNP were preparing to downgrade the independence campaign, and that the much vaunted and much promised referendum might disappear into the ether. Now the SNP has abandoned the independence campaign and not demand independence anymore, or even a referendum, but to ask, according to the motion at their conference and the leadership, Westminster for a democratic effect. Now, some of you, many of you, in fact, probably all of you, were in the great demonstration for independence this year in Glasgow Green. And you'll remember the cry, what do we want? Independence. When do we want it?
Now.
Well, the SNP have changed that. They've amended it. It's now a cry of, what do we want? A democratic effect. And when do we want it? Not anytime soon. Under the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon, the SNP conned the independence campaign. Under the leadership of Hamza Yousaf, the SNP have abandoned the independence campaign, and thus they have abdicated any claim for leadership of it. So let me start this speech by articulating what the SNP find it impossible to state with any clarity. Alba stand for Scottish independence. Every vote for Alba at each and every election is a vote for independence. And if a majority of votes is cast in any election in that direction, then the Scottish Government is mandated to negotiate independence. If Westminster says no, then we should mobilise domestic and international opinion to force them to respect the democratic wishes of the sovereign Scottish people. Now, if I can say that in two simple sentences, then why can't the SNP? Can I suggest the answer? They produce convoluted gobbledygook because they have no idea what they're doing. Their language betrays the fact that they have no seriousness of intent. They are stringing people along. And the problem is, of course, that that isn't Scotland's greatest secret. I know it, you know it, Scotland knows it, but so does Westminster. Why do you think it is that successive UK Prime Ministers have been emboldened in their progressive refusals to countenance an independence referendum? Why have we gone from Theresa May, now is not the time, to Johnson's not now, to Sunak's just plain no? This is because they look the SNP government straight in the eye and have judged there is nothing there. There's no threat, no ambition, no plan, no seriousness of intent, and that's not going to change anytime soon. I know Hamza Yousaf. I gave him his first job, not his first ministerial job. I gave him his first actual job. He is not useless. He's an affable sort of guy, and I sympathise with him greatly about the current circumstances facing his family in Gaza. But affability no more than continuity does in Scotland. You and a judge. Is this the First Minister leading a nation with steel in its character, the ability to take us on and win? Or will he just shiver, melt, and run away at the first sign of pressure? Right now, Westminster thinks Hamza is melting. It's the task of Alba to offer a team independence to take on Westminster. That is our task, and this conference is absolutely essential in building that realization. Alba is going to build team independence to take on Westminster. Now, Alba is a new party, a small party, but that doesn't mean we have to think or act small. We were the first party in the United Kingdom with parliamentary representatives to call for an immediate ceasefire in the Middle East. Let me reinvigorate that call for an immediate ceasefire today and explain exactly why. We hold no brief for Hamas. They are a terrorist organization, and the atrocity on innocent families they committed 3 weeks ago is beyond simple condemnation. The Israeli and other hostages they took that dreadful day should be released immediately and without condition. However, it's precisely because Hamas are a terrorist organization that the proportionate and legal response is not to bombard and invade Gaza at the cost of countless thousands more innocent lives. Hamas are not a legitimate government of Gaza. Instead, they should be hunted down as criminals and brought to international justice. Now, I want to exempt the First Minister from what I'm about to say now, because as I said earlier, we should all respect and sympathise with his present family circumstances. However, the reality is that UK politicians treat the unfolding tragedy in the Middle East as some sort of exercise in political positioning. The Tory government want to expose Starmer. Starmer, in turn, is determined to shadow the Tory position to avoid any charges of anti-Semitism. The rest of the Labour Party can't understand why they're not calling for a ceasefire and ignoring the clear guidelines of international law against collective punishment and civilian deaths. So let us be clear. You cannot justify the deaths of thousands of children in Gaza on the basis you were actually aiming at someone else. Whoever you were aiming at, the children are just as dead. What is striking from Westminster is any constructive proposal for securing a peace. The UK is the former colonial power. UK politicians have therefore some measure of responsibility for 8 decades of a constant cycle of violence, and it's no use just parroting the American position. Hamas can't be left in control of Gaza. An Israeli occupation will lead to a new generation of terrorism. Perhaps Gaza could be run by the UN or a protectorate of the Sunni states until it can administer itself peacefully and democratically. I don't know the full answer. Perhaps no one does. But I do know this. You will never find a way forward until you stop the killing. And you'll never find a permanent peace without justice for the Palestinian people. We may be a small party, and perhaps we're a small voice, but let our voice be for peace and justice. I want to talk to you a bit about Alba policy proposals. You know, I've been sitting in the chair here along with Tasmina and the party chair and your other MPs, and I've been interested in the number of people coming to the rostrum, people I didn't know, and speaking so well. And that, strangely enough, is a very good thing. You know, somebody who you don't know speaks very well. You can say, that's a sign of a party which is growing in confidence, growing in eloquence. So I think at this conference, I can see the party coming of age in policy platform terms. Now, in the last 2 years, we've established our credentials as a social democratic party in the mainstream of the Scottish political tradition. We are Scotland's democratic party, favouring an elected head of state and repudiating the patronage and privilege of the British state. We are a Scotland's radical party, who want to see Scotland's resources used for the benefit of the people and developed in a manner compatible with the future of the planet. Above all, we are Scotland's independence party, with our strategy of crystal clarity principle compared to the muddled equivocation of the new SNP. I think at this conference we're moving forward again. Thanks to one of our newer activists and your members, the outdoors icon, Cameron McNeish, we have the beginnings of a radical land policy, which can tackle the age-old injustice of the concentration of land ownership in the hands of chinless aristocrats and faceless investors. We also have the proposal on our agenda for a guaranteed mother's income, not just a proposal to bring economic justice to hard-pressed families, but to start to tackle the underlying social problems, because the chains of poverty are imprinted in the early years of child development. Thirdly, I was actually pleased to see the First Minister return to my own policies of council tax freeze this year. Indeed, we proposed it on a Friday, and Humza announced it 3 days later. You know, Humza used to write my speeches. Now I'm writing his. However, I also noted he turned to a policy I negotiated 10 years ago from Westminster, which hasn't, for some reason, been used over this last decade. And that's the ability of the Scottish Government to issue its own financial bonds on the international marketplace. On our agenda at this conference, we have a developing transport strategy. Why don't we add to that among the first Scottish bond issues should be project finance to dual the A9 and the A96 in line with the commitments made by my administration and betrayed by recent SNP governments. The SNP government I led built the fourth crossing, the Aberdeen peripheral route, completed the M74, the M8 and the M80, and to serve this great conurbation of Glasgow, and we built a railway to the borders. I'm seriously scratching my head to think of any major transport initiatives and projects since. And it's time on the A9 for the Highlands of Scotland to have its turn of a modern transport infrastructure. I want to talk to you a bit about our party. You see, I believe that Alba is the last best hope for independence in this generation. We have a clear goal to make a substantial breakthrough at the next Scottish elections. And given that the SNP have abdicated their leadership of the independence movement, our intervention in next year's general election will be widespread. However, to achieve this breakthrough, we need recruits from across the political spectrum, and in particular from the SNP itself. And I'll let you into a secret. You don't make people come and join you by beating them over the head and telling them how right you are and how wrong they have been. Social media is a great tool for spreading a political message, but as an instrument for political conversion and conversation, it sucks. Now, Alba has an X factor. We have 3 Ps, principle, policies, and people. But to achieve our objective, we need another, and that is perspiration. We need to spend less time online and more time on the doorsteps.
Here.
We need street warriors for Alba, not keyboard ones. And we need to extend the hand of friendship, who are only now facing the dawning realization that they have been strung along for almost 10 years by the SNP leadership. There's no one in this hall, perhaps no one in this country, has more reason to feel resentful of the current leadership of the new SNP than I do. They are a shower. But within that party, there are many fine nationalists and plenty of fellow Scots. We need to enlist their help for Alba to break through and win. There's an old Corrie song that I love, Scotland Will Flourish. I like it a lot, and I particularly like the line which says, Scotland will flourish with an eye to the future and a heart to forgive. Let that be Alba's motto, an eye to the future and a heart to forgive. We forgive because we have our eyes on the future independence of our country. Independence, always and forever. You may have noticed that speech was slightly shorter than some of the ones you might have been used to from me. There's a reason for that. And I mean, all that stuff about the social media is very handy, because as I was making the speech and calling for new recruits to the Alba party, I got a message saying a number of people were joining during the course of this live broadcast. And I would like you now to welcome the latest recruit, and that is Miss Ash Regan, the MSP Edinburgh Sweeper.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Scots, it's good to be here. You know, I had planned to stay put at home for a weekend I had planned of household repairs, but then it dawned on me. What's more important, fixing a blocked drain or coming here to help unblock Scotland's path to independence? The reason I'm standing in front of you here today is because I believe that the SNP has strayed from the path to independence, and it's time for Alba to get Scotland back on track. So that wave of optimism sparked by the 2014 referendum, it swept many people into the Yes movement and myself and others into the Scottish Parliament in 2016. And we really all did think that it was only a matter of time. Even after delay upon delay, I stood for election again in Edinburgh Eastern in 2021, hoping desperately that the solemn promise that there would be another independence referendum this year would come to be realised. Now, instead of a referendum, the SNP leadership is calling for something that they're calling a democratic effect of a timescale where it seems to be sometime or maybe never. They won't even commit to a plebiscite poll at the next Scottish election. They're saying they're only going to consider it. Well, if they're capable of reneging on a definite commitment to a referendum this year, what's to stop them forgetting about a conditional commitment to an election poll in future years? The position on independence taken at the SNP conference has not just let the Yes movement down, it's let Scotland down. Now, no doubt, my decision that I've taken will anger some. And there does seem to be so much anger in the world today, including anger across the independence movement. But anger is easy. It's a seductive trap that we can fall into. It provides that temporary relief over a feeling of pain and hurt, of being misled by those that have betrayed our trust. But let's stop numbing our pain with anger. All it's doing is making things worse, and we must all rise above it now. Let's channel our collective energies into constructive action. And when it comes to the online world, a place where anger often festers, let's replace vitriol with vision and hashtags with handshakes. Will never forgive us if we let anger consume the independence cause. So let's stop that anger today. Right now, hope returns to the Scottish independence movement. Working together across streets, across the country, and across parliaments is what will refocus minds and hearts. And it won't be easy, but there's not much that's worthwhile in life that comes easy. And it's not enough just to talk about independence. We need a tangible plan, a plan that's more than words, a plan that's a sequence of actions that will lead us to an independent Scotland. And at this conference, there'll be a debate on the Alba Party's independence and general election strategy, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what the outcome of that will be. Now, I'd like to take the opportunity to speak to any yes voters that might be watching this at home, and particularly to anyone that's feeling politically homeless right now. Alba is ready to pick up the baton and to do what is needed to achieve independence as a matter of urgency. Not maybe, not hopefully, not sometime in the distant future, but now, because now is our time. It's Scotland's time. I sacrificed, as you'll know, the trappings of ministerial office about a year ago now over a matter of principle on the gender recognition reform bill. And like you, I cannot and I will not compromise on the rights or safety of women and girls. So I'm joining Alba on principle 2. I'm joining on the principle that independence cannot be a carrot that is deployed at election time just to keep the voters voting for you. Independence must be that material commitment. And I was voted into Parliament to progress it and to achieve it. And my solemn commitment to my constituents in Edinburgh Eastern and the trust that they put in me, I feel can now only be served by the saltire blue principle of the Alba Party. Conference, I'm sure many in the SNP will say that I should resign my seat. But why? I'm staying true to my election pledge. Yes! Can the other 60 or so SNP MSPs really say the same? No. Can they say that they secured the no ifs, the no buts referendum? Can they say that they've secured an election mandate for independents at each and every election starting now? So maybe it's the 60 that should resign their seats and explain themselves to the people. I want to say to voters out there to trust us to deliver what you have voted for, which is politicians that get on with it and deliver independence. And lastly, let us remember, independence isn't our end goal. It's Scotland's new beginning. Imagine a Scotland that leads and not follows, a Scotland that leads the way in living standards, in economic resilience and innovation. A nation that invented the modern world can surely end poverty in our country. So here we are, united in our purpose, but let's also be united in our action. And so for the sake of every Scot who dreams of what Scotland can be, let's turn those dreams into plans and those plans into action. So I am proud to become, as of today, the first ever Alba member of the Scottish Parliament. And our task is to make me the first of many. So let's get to work.
Can I take this away for auction? Well, we like auctioning it.
All right.
But if you want this.
I'll get it. Here you go.